Corporate funding for this program was provided by General Motors. Whether it's building cars and trucks or supporting public television programs like this one, General Motors is in the business of helping people go where they want to go. That grew out of wilderness and bogs, first farmed and hunted by the Algonquin and Nacotchtank, then by the English colonials. It grew to become the heart of our nation. Abundant with nature and imbued with history. Trees rooted firmly in the lore of the American presidency. No place is more private, and perhaps no place is more subject to the public eye. No ordinary patch of land, for these are the gardens and grounds of the White House, the President's Park. The gardens and grounds of the White House are a place for symbolism and ceremony. The scenic backdrop for historic visits by heads of state. And the artful stage for the signing of bills and treaties. And the awarding of honors. But it is also the intimate backyard of the president and his family. A place for retreat. On 2 days in the spring and fall, parts of the grounds are open to visitors, allowing them to walk where presidents have walked for almost 200 years. The landscape that they see has been transformed with the changing tastes and needs of its residents and of the nation. Some changes have been made for practical reasons, stables giving way to garages, and even landing areas. And while security has always been a concern, it's only recently that the grounds of the White House have been so heavily restricted. Throughout the 1800s, most of the grounds were open to the public. As late as the early 1930s, one visitor was able to walk in and interrupt President Herbert Hoover's dinner. But with World War II, access was restricted, and sentries were posted to maintain security.
Behind the scenes, mobile guns, troops, and the picked guards of the White House are now familiar sights in wartime Washington.
The grounds within the fence of the White House cover a little more than 18 acres, divided into the North Lawn, bordered by Pennsylvania Avenue, and the much larger South Lawn. But the official borders of the President's Park also include Lafayette Park, as well as the land surrounding the Executive Office Building, the Department of the Treasury, and the ellipse leading to the Washington Monument. The grounds have gone through many evolutions since Pierre Charles L'Enfant first planned America's new capital in the early 1790s. He envisioned the home of the president as a palace in a magnificent park of 82 acres. The building design was scaled back, But the president's park boundaries remained. Still, it was far from a palatial setting. When President John Adams moved into the White House in 1800, his wife Abigail declared the grounds wild, a wilderness. Livestock and wild game roamed barren grounds bordering marshlands to the south. In 1801, President Thomas Jefferson began the first landscape plan for the grounds, enclosing them with fences and installing an elegant arched gate at the southeast entrance, bordered by willows. Presidents were said to enter triumphantly through its gate and exit at the end of their terms, weeping with the willows. Jefferson's landscape was badly damaged when the White House was burned by British troops in the War of 1812. Of all the presidents, John Quincy Adams was one of the most experienced gardeners. He wanted to establish a museum of American plants, and soon the barren grounds were covered with 700 seedling trees, including oak, maple, and elm. But when Adams' arch-rival Andrew Jackson was inaugurated in 1829, his supporters overran the White House grounds. Jackson expanded upon Adams' rambling gardens with gravel paths, a driveway, and a stable for his riding horses. An orangery supplied citrus fruits until 1853, when it was replaced by a greenhouse. During the Civil War, part of the President's Park became the Army's pasture. Cows kept on the ellipse fed the troops. As the city grew, the marshes to the south became the bane of the presidents, plaguing them with mosquitoes and horrible smells. By the late 1800s, they had been filled in, providing ground to connect the ellipse and Washington Monument. Greenhouses located atop the West Terrace had been expanded into an enormous complex by the turn of the century. They were a favorite of first ladies, like Mrs. Rutherford B. Hayes, for their privacy. They opened directly into the White House and contained orchids, fruit trees, camellias, and even a sago palm said to be George Washington's. Mrs. William McKinley took special interest in the roses. But when President Theodore Roosevelt renovated the Executive Mansion in 1902, the greenhouses were demolished to make room for offices. In 1935, the celebrated landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. presented President Franklin D. Roosevelt with a new design for the grounds. A cluster of trees to the south was cleared to reveal a view of the White House for the public. It would also provide an open vista looking out from the house to the Washington Monument and Jefferson Memorial. President Harry Truman took advantage of the view, adding a second-floor balcony to the south portico in 1948.
President Truman's balcony at the White House is completed in time for the summer months. The view is grand, and a president might very well like to stay and enjoy it.
Olmsted devised a master plan for the entire White House grounds that is still followed today. The President's Park is designated Reservation Number 1 by the National Park Service. 33,000 tulip bulbs are planted each year. Nearly 2.5 tons of fertilizer are used in the President's Park, and the shrubs, trees, and flower beds require 10 full-time gardeners. Keeping the trees properly trimmed is no small matter. This is a job for the highest level workers at the White House. The North Lawn is more than anything else a grove of stately trees. the trees were young, this statue of Thomas Jefferson, the only one of a president ever placed on White House grounds, was moved to the U.S. Capitol in 1873 and soon replaced by a fountain installed for President Ulysses S. Grant. It was powered by steam. Between the fountain and the north portico is a unique planting of boxwoods installed by President Harry Truman in 1952. Their uneven contours designed to offset the geometric symmetry of the house. Outside the fence, but still within the boundaries of the President's Park, is Lafayette Park. In its center is a statue commemorating President Andrew Jackson as the hero of the Battle of New Orleans in 1815. It was the first equestrian statue cast in the United States. Lafayette Park is the place where crowds have gathered during times of national celebration. And it's also where many Americans exercise their constitutional rights. In 1917, when suffragettes picketed the White House for the right to vote, the press took notice. Today, most people see the President's Park as the background for journalists broadcasting their reports around the world. But the gardens are also filled with many private places, rarely seen by the public, especially in the south grounds. Alongside the colonnade that connects the main house to the east wing is the Jacqueline Kennedy Garden. First ladies often use this area for informal receptions. Long known as the East Garden or the First Lady's Garden, its current design was created during the Kennedy administration. It was a significant change from the look of the garden when it was photographed with President Woodrow Wilson and his second wife, Edith. A variety of herbs, including chives, thyme, and rosemary, are cut from this garden for the White House kitchen. Up until the 1880s, vegetable gardens on the grounds supplied the president's table. The temporary exhibition of 20th century American sculpture was instituted in the First Lady's Garden by Hillary Rodham Clinton. Just outside the Oval Office, on the opposite side of the White House, is one of the most famous gardens in the world, the Rose Garden. Anchored in four corners with magnolia trees and bordered by rows of crabapple trees and evergreen shrubs, beds of seasonal flowers form a geometric pattern based on an 18th century garden design. The creation of the Rose Garden was supervised by President Kennedy's friend Rachel Lambert Mellon in 1961. At the turn of the century, First Lady Edith Roosevelt had designed a colonial garden here, filled with old-fashioned flowers, sweet peas, black-eyed Susans, quince, and jasmine, among others. President Woodrow Wilson's first wife, Ellen, replaced the colonial garden with the first Rose Garden in 1913, but died shortly after its completion. The Rose Garden has been the scene of hundreds of White House events. In one remarkable meeting, President Kennedy welcomed a group of young men that would include a future president, Bill Clinton. The only wedding of a president's child outside on the White House grounds took place in the Rose Garden in 1971, the marriage of President Richard Nixon's daughter, Patricia. Most outdoor events take place on the South Lawn, the site since Lincoln's presidency for elaborate ceremonies for dignitaries. President Lyndon Johnson brought his own unique stamp to the South grounds in 1969 when he sponsored an old-fashioned county fair. Beyond the fence of the South Lawn on the Ellipse, an annual holiday tradition takes place, the lighting of the National Christmas Tree, first lit by President Coolidge in 1923 to promote the use of electricity. The South Lawn is also the site of the annual Easter egg roll, first begun by President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1879. In 1902, Thomas Edison documented the raucous event. In 1920, a maypole was part of the festivities. The Hoover grandchildren performed in 1932, as did the U.S. Marine Band, who have performed for White House audiences since 1801. In the middle of the South Lawn, there are two large hills of mysterious origin. They're called the Jefferson Mounds because some think that he designed them. Prominent on the East Mound was this American elm planted by John Quincy Adams. It was 165 years old when, diseased and toppling, it had to be cut down in 1991. In its place, First Lady Barbara Bush planted a graft from the original tree. President Adams, the consummate horticulturalist, would be proud to know his legacy lives on. The most historic trees on the White House grounds today are these southern magnolias. In the 1830s, President Andrew Jackson transplanted the magnolias from his Tennessee home in memory of his wife Rachel, who died just before his inauguration. Legend has it that under this tree, Woodrow Wilson proposed marriage to his future bride. Here, too, as part of tradition, President Warren G. Harding entertained wounded veterans of World War I. Beside the Jackson magnolias, the landscape and the house become one as wisteria frame the stairways of the south portico. Just in front of the south portico is a place where the president goes when he needs a lift. President Dwight Eisenhower was the first to begin using a helicopter from the lawn in the 1950s. And sometimes presidential pets get to go along for the ride. But they don't always recognize the chain of command. President and Mrs. Ronald Reagan's dog, Lucky, was banished for his lack of decorum. Other pets have had free run of the property, like President Franklin Roosevelt's dog.
I am a little black dog who lives in a big white house. Yup, there I am. My name is Fella. Look at me, all a dither over a silly bushy-tailed intruder. And what does it get me?
Exercise, Bub, exercise.
Oh, a Republican.
Presidential dogs' talents aren't just limited to the screen. President and Mrs. Bush's dog, Millie, co-authored a bestseller. Chelsea Clinton's cat, Socks, is less ambitious than her canine colleagues. Caroline Kennedy had a pony named Macaroni, as well as dogs, hamsters, and ducks. Teddy Roosevelt's family had quite a menagerie, including flying squirrels, a hyena, a bear, and a macaw named Eli. While Mrs. Calvin Coolidge's raccoon, Rebecca, was often the center of attention at White House events. Rebecca never knew her intended fate. She had been a gift to the White House for the president's Thanksgiving dinner. Benjamin Harrison had a pet goat named Old Whiskers. Many early presidents kept livestock on the grounds. President Taft's cow, Pauline, had the distinction of being the last White House cow. And President Woodrow Wilson brought a flock of sheep to the grounds during World War I to keep the grass trim. Some creatures come and go on the White House grounds, oblivious to the intense security. The Audubon Naturalists Society has counted 22 species of birds here. Among them are these mallard ducks, often found in the South Fountain. The first South Fountain was installed in this spot in 1875 by President Ulysses S. Grant. Today, it's heated for year-round operation. Close to the fountain, but secluded by a large grove of trees, is the White House tennis court, first built in this spot for President William Taft in 1909, and the site of many celebrity tournaments. In a grove beside the tennis court is the Children's Garden, a gift of President and Mrs. Lyndon Johnson, given as a tribute to all the presidential grandchildren. Nearby and well concealed is the grounds crew maintenance garage. This bald cypress tree was granted a presidential pardon by President Jimmy Carter in 1979 when he had the landscape shed redesigned to avoid cutting it down. Presidents have used the South grounds over time for a variety of sports and exercises. Near the maintenance shed is a basketball court built for President George Bush. President Bush also enjoyed playing horseshoes, providing an opportunity for international diplomacy when Boris Yeltsin paid a visit in 1992. As Assistant Secretary of Navy, Franklin D. Roosevelt exercised with President Wilson's cabinet, while the Hoover Medicine Ball cabinet was renowned for their regular morning workout. President Harding practiced golf on the South Lawn and trained his dog, Laddie Boy, to retrieve balls. President Eisenhower was such an avid golfer that the U.S. Golf Association built a putting green for him on the South Lawn. But the grounds aren't just for adults. The Roosevelt children had their own jungle gym, while the Kennedys even had a trampoline. In this Atlas cedar on the South Lawn, President Carter designed a treehouse for his daughter Amy. The grove behind the Oval Office helps to conceal one last exercise area, a swimming pool built for President Gerald Ford in 1975. Excavation for the pool revealed a pit filled with debris from the White House after it was burned in 1814. President Gerald Ford seemed to enjoy his inaugural swim, despite having a little less privacy than one might expect in a backyard pool. Near the swimming pool, a path leads to the most secluded spot on the White House grounds. Rarely seen or photographed, the President's Patio was created in 1986 for President Ronald Reagan as a private hideaway. Each president has left his legacy in the gardens and grounds of the White House, shaping and molding the landscape with history and the future firmly in mind. And nowhere is this more true than in the trees of the President's Park. Trees unify the White House landscape, giving it structure and a link to the past. The history that they embody is cherished. Their limbs supported by cables and poles. Their roots carefully wrapped to prevent injury during construction. President Rutherford B. Hayes, an ardent history buff, started the practice of planting commemorative trees when he planted buckeyes from his native state of Ohio to mark the nation's centennial in 1876. President Eisenhower planted this pin oak near his beloved putting green, where it still thrives today. 100 years after President Hayes planted his buckeyes, this American elm was planted by First Lady Betty Ford in honor of the nation's bicentennial. Today, there are over 500 trees on the grounds. and over 40 of them were planted to honor and commemorate. Magnolias that have given shade since the time of Andrew Jackson. A young tree with bloodlines to John Quincy Adams. The White House grounds capture the span of our nation's history. The gardens endure through the seasons and through changing administrations. Like the democracy of the nation that they represent, they have evolved over time, constantly shaped by new ideas and new personalities. The future of our nation unfolds with the seasons as history walks upon these grounds.
Corporate funding for this program was provided by General Motors. Whether it's building cars and trucks or supporting public television programs like this one, General Motors is in the business of helping people go where they want to go.
To order a VHS copy of Upon These Grounds and an activity guide, please call WQED Video at 1-800-274-1307 or White House Historical Association at 202-737-8292.